not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psychology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java on the 19th of January 2016 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Very interesting events happening. Of course, we have the budget deadline, the debt deadline, so to speak. We'll talk about it and the political implications of it. Get it out here. I've had the flu, so I'm kind of still with it. We'll even talk about the flu. It's ran havoc across the continental U.S. and various strains, no doubt, out there. Some of it's sinus trouble. I think ours is more sinus trouble than flu. Very hard to many times sort these particular situations out. But we'll start this off at the border. That's where some of the Trump people want to talk about, because their excuse with the Dreamers, that's the over a half million young people that were brought here by their parents, educated here, trained, etc., whatever adjective you want to use, are now facing a deportation. And as far as an equitable situation, it is just strictly just not fair. It's beyond being just a business immigration issue, and it has been looked at because even the Chamber of Commerce supports immigration. Immigration has been something, a workable immigration plan. Senator McCain from Arizona and various others have worked on it to get out the hysteria, the racial hysteria, because when people see immigration, they're talking about where we're going in a minute here, the border with Mexico, primarily speaking. Most of the so-called immigrants they are dealing with do not come across the border as such. They come on aeroplanes, and that is to be understood for people out there. And it's an unfortunate situation that that particular racist slant has been placed to it. And we'll dive down into some of the states that DJ Trump carried and where they can, as they say, cast the blame for a shutdown if there is a shutdown. This was from the Public News Service. Border Patrol agents vandalized water left in desert for immigrants. That's on the 17th of July from Tucson, Arizona. Border Patrol agents have been caught on video dumping out water and confiscating blankets left in the desert by aid workers, according to reports just out from the humanitarian group No More Deaths. The group put out almost 32,000 gallons of water from 2012 to 2015 and found that 3,000 gallons were vandalized. Trail cameras caught multiple cases of border agents in the act of dumping water and removing blankets, two as recent as 2017. Kate Morgan, abuse documentation and advocacy coordinator with No More Deaths, maintains these acts could make a treacherous journey turn lethal. Oftentimes we find our water drops were vandalized in some of the most lethal portions of the desert. She states, the act of destroying those aid supplies we believe constitutes a deadly act against people who are crossing the border. Morgan said that the Pomona County Medical Examiner Office took a look at the bodies of 539 border crossers during the study period. The Border Patrol says it will look into the reports that did not respond to the inquiries deadline for the story. Well, hopefully they'll go back and follow up this particular story. In the past, the agency had said it would leave the water alone, but would not say if agents had been disciplined in citing privacy concerns. In 1994, the Border Patrol adopted a tactic called Preserve Through Deterrent, which posts that making the journey more difficult will convince people not to risk it. The same reasoning behind lengthening the border wall would lead migrants to cross in more rugged terrain. And this is something the Trump people do not talk about. People have very, very compelling reason for leaving their homes and making such a deadly crossing. It's really has a very little to do with the presence in our presence in the desert. And the study showed that 86% of the water pulled out of the desert is used by immigrants, while a small portion of it was destroyed by hunters and people using a desert for recreation. And the militias, we're not forgetting those. A report called Interference with Humanitarian Aid Deaths and Disappearances on the Border is available at disappearancereport.org. I'll pin this to our show so that you'll be able to get it. I've not looked at it yet, but it's a very, very sad situation. We'll pinch this. All right, let's move on here to the main body of our presentation. We use the Washington Post because it is one of the sources within the U.S. Capitol. The headline here is Showdown Looms as Senate Democrats threaten GOP plan despite House action. Bill lacks Senate support, and GOP appears to be preparing a script for blaming the Democrats. This is not an unusual situation here. I mean, it's one of those situations that we see oftentimes. House approves bill to keep government open as the Senate Democrats take the heat for threatening to block it. Now, this is by Michael Du Bois and Ed O'Keefe. Ed O'Keefe's normally on, Face the Nation. The House passed this. Now, it's just a short-term little bill. Till early February, cobbled together enough votes to overcome internal revolt, they called it. By Thursday evening, 9 Democratic senators who had voted for prior spending measures, these are these short-term things, in December said they would not support the latest proposal, 4-week deal. 30 other Democrats and at least 2 Republicans leaving the bill short. They have to have 60 in the Senate. As a result, Republican leaders, long on the defensive against claims they are failing to govern, appeared in bold as they sought to cast the Democrats as the obstacles to compromise keeping critical government functions running. The Republicans, this is from their playbook. They've done it in national government, and they've also done it in state government. From Old Man McConnell, he said Democratic colleagues' demand on illegal immigration. You notice the word he uses here, illegal immigration, at the behest of their far left. It's not the far left base. This is the backbone of the Democratic Party, the backbone of American humanity. And throw that in, the Chamber of Commerce said we are now threatening to crowd out the needs of veterans, military families, opiate treatment centers, and other Americans who rely on the federal government for all over illegal immigration. This is not illegal immigration. At this point in time, the Dreamers are legal here. Their stays are running out. The Trump administration is running them out. But under President Obama, they were granted a legal, I guess you'd call it quasi-legal status. Senators in both parties voted to open debate. This is in the Senate on Thursday. We'll sit down together and solve this with the president or without him. This is Charles Schumer, Chuck Schumer. He is the Democratic leader. And this from Little Paulie Ryan. He's the Speaker of the House. Very unbelievable. I asked the American people to understand the only people, the way of keeping the government open are Senate Democrats. Not exactly true. One Republican attached a long-term extension, for one, to the children's health care program and delayed several unpopular health care taxes. The bill does not include protection for the Dreamers. Children, immigrants brought illegally as children to, in other words, come across borders, etc., overstayed their visas, etc. They know who they are. Nonetheless, meanwhile, rallying lawmakers, these short-term fixes are not to the benefit of anyone. They could easily pass a bill that would in other words, would pass the debt ceiling. Now, what happens here, Mark Warner, of course, and Tim Kaine, they represent thousands of people that will be furloughed. They could not vote for a bill that would not include relief for Dreamers, disaster funding, and this is the opiate treatment funding and echoing demands of Democratic leaders. Now, the opiate treatment funding, we see one of the problems here, some of this we don't really have the long-term outlines there. These issues are not going away and need to be addressed immediately, no doubt about that. They criticized also DJ Trump. Trump went to the backwaters of Pennsylvania, said they are pushing for a shutdown to distant voters from GOP, distract actually from the tax plan. The tax plan is out there, but we'll be on numbers, man. That's our financial program, macroeconomics program, and we'll talk more about it. From Lindsey Graham, he's from a senator from South Carolina, a Republican. Basis says we don't have a reliable partner in the White House to negotiate with. He's been working on the immigration matter for quite some time. Excuse me, in a fair situation. If we can't agree, your party has a majority in the House and the Senate to pass your own resolution, but will the bill we cannot support? 71 of 93 House Democrats wrote to Ryan on Thursday. Now, some Democrats jumped over this reactionary Mark Meadows. He's from North Carolina. I promise you he doesn't have the votes. Well, anyway, this is the Freedom Caucus where Trump tried to win people over. Anyway, He may have promised that, but he caved in. Let's bring the bill over and make it quickly. Anyway, this is kind of I won't continue this because this is a combination of things. Now, this is the winners and losers. It's just an analysis by the Washington Post. Public and private polling is giving each side something to hang their hat on if the government shuts down. For Democrats, there's hope in the survey showing that more Americans would blame Trump. In conservative states, the blame would shift to Democrats, no doubt about that. I think it's a big loser for both sides. From Susan Collins, she's from Maine, a swing vote. The reality that public option would probably fall somewhere in between means the public could lose too, because neither side has the incentive to surrender, no doubt about that. In each of the two prolonged shutdowns the last 25 years, the end came only when it became clear that the president's party, that was Clinton in the middle of the 90s, and Barack Obama had won the battle of public opinion. That was in 2013. The Republicans were blamed for that. President Obama ran in 2014. The re-election was reelected. Now, in the case the Democrats enter the budget showdown in a strong position than the Republicans on Capitol Hill, for instance. This is the Post released now. This excuse me, released on September 30th, hours before this is back in 2013, found that 1 in 4 voters approved of how the Republicans were handling the negotiation, which they refused to fund the rest of the government unless President Obama agreed to that demand, but no funds go forward for the Affordable Care Act. He did not. He ended up winning it after a 16-day showdown. Both those showdowns led to additional bipartisan talks about producing broader budget details, but the political fallout there was bad enough. McConnell declared there would be no shutdowns on his watch. There is no education, he said, in the second kick of the mule. The mule may be about to kick again, no doubt about that. McConnell has no choice in this matter. He's going to have to negotiate, or there will, in fact, be a shutdown. Overall, in 12 states, voters would blame Trump, congressional Republicans rather than congressional Democrats. If there's a shutdown, 45 to 35. Trump won. These are the states that Trump won. Now, again, these are states that don't play very much in the national scheme of things. Montana and North Dakota. West Virginia, it doesn't really. It's a small state. It's a poverty-stricken state. Now, then you add Missouri, which used to be a swing state, more important there. Indiana, somewhat important. The Democrats do have a senator there. But will the shutdown hurt more than helps? Well, it obviously depends on where Trump's ratings are, on a number of other things that are going to happen. In these 5 states, voters split the shutdown blame each between Trump and the Democrats. The results, 48% to 39% onto the Democrats' shoulder. But those are states also that don't have an interest in DECA. They are not border states. Indiana, somewhat. There are Latinos in Indiana. Missouri, but they're not border states. So this is where the only reason we have to pass the CR today is because the Democrats refused to close on a spending agreement. Ryan is lying there. Let me go back on the national parks. President Obama closed the national parks for safety of people. Federal funds are set to expire. That'll be midnight tonight. We're still working out a detailed plan. And the people in the parks have no idea. Now, Death Valley National Park, that's in California, which sees 80,000 visitors a month. We just got a memo about this yesterday. Today is the first day we're seriously thinking about it. We don't have a plan yet. That's Abby Wines, somebody speaking for that park. Other federal agencies were preparing to close across Washington senior officials were pulling out the detailed manuals there. About 80,000 federal workers were furloughed during the last shutdown. That was in 2013 for 16 days. Very, very costly. The impact, the district's 17 museums, the National Museum would remain open Saturday and Sunday, but they would close on Monday. The National Gallery there would be closed. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention would furlough about 61% of its staff. That's roughly 8,400 people. The Department of Education, which is on this right wing, 90% of the staff in the first week. Employees are serving 13 million students with financial aid. Hopefully people have booked that in already. Excuse me. The Postal Service, which is now would continue, obviously, so you'll be able to get the junk mail in. The shuts of archonic parks provided to be a political flashpoint during the government shutdowns. That was in 95 and 2013. But that's a catch-all. Interview Senator Bennett, he's from Colorado, describes the effort as a calculated ploy to obstruct the real impact of failing to reach a spending agreement. It's purely purely motivated by politics, he said. But no matter what we do, there will be no way to cover up the many catastrophic effects of of a shutdown. Trump and company, the Democrats, were spoiling a shutdown fight. It would distance the public. Well, anyway, that's ridiculous. There is no agreement out there, and the shutting down of the parks. The problem is some of the concessions in parks have changed from what they used to be. When I was a child, a lot of these private operations in there, in the parks, will obviously stay open. Will still allow limited access when it were possible to national parks, refuges, and public land, including roads that have been cleared of snow. Now, these are wilderness-type restrooms will remain open. Many of these smaller national parks I've found over the years, they probably haven't been out there in a few years in the national parks, but at one time, I remember on the Reagan, a long ways back there, some of the parks were closed and they just had a container there to put your $5 in. The Interior Department Deputy Secretary said park officials a draft contingency plan outlining how they could stay open. Experts on the parks say that providing access when the parks are not adequately staffed poses serious risk, and that's why President Obama was wise enough to close them. President of the National Park Conservation Association said in an email that the vague direction and superintendents are receiving from headquarters put them in an impossible situation. This has been a handmark of DJ Trump's administration, sending out directives, but the directives themselves are very unclear. They are very, very vague, and what they leave people in is an atmosphere of nothing but confusion, which in itself is ostracism. You find that in many of the bureaucratic agencies. On the legal side, we don't do a lot of work with bureaucratic agencies, administrative type agencies, but we've noticed dealing with these issues that there have been all sorts of obstructions in, I believe it was North Carolina or maybe South Carolina. People applying for various types of public aid, Medicaid, etc., had the local officials say that they had not received their application or accompanying documentation, when in fact they had proof from the Postal Service they had received them. So what that basically meant was they had to reapply, or that they would lose their eligibility. These are some of the tricks that have been put in on the administrative part, the same problems many people have with Social Security being understaffed, particularly applying for Social Security disability and supplemental income that people are waiting almost 600 days for a hearing. And then that hearing, they're denied, and then they're moved to another hearing, and more medical validation is required when, in fact, these people are disabled. This is the kind of thing that happens under this type of administration, that these bureaucracies like these Freedom Caucus or the Tea Party, so-called Republicans, fall in line with the same people that are ultimately eliminating the program. In the case of Medicaid, or in the case of Social Security disability, putting more and more qualifications on it, such as the idea of a work type of program for Medicaid. Excuse me, that is the government's program for the poor, whereas you have Medicare for seniors. Our solution to that is single payer. Single payer is a national insurance program. Once it is there, all citizens would be eligible for the program. And he would outline basic requirements as Obamacare did. The difference would be it would be a purely national program, and a percentage would be deducted from workers' checks that had incomes as Medicare. Those that do not would be paid mechanism by the federal government. That would take the states out of the Medicaid racket once and for all. Now, as far as nursing homes, I'm not certain about what we do about that. That's a state matter. Anyway, moving on here from the national parks. Let me get the latest from the Supreme Court, then we'll go to our friends at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. Supreme Court said late Thursday that North Carolina does not immediately have to redraw its congressional districts, meaning that the 2018 elections would likely be held in the districts the lower court found unconstitutional. As a three-judge panel found that unconstitutional, Justices Ginsburg and Sotomayor said they would have not granted the request. Normally, the Supreme Court doesn't to require going to new districts before it has a chance to review the lower court hearing. Now, what happened here is the Republicans in the state of North Carolina controlled 10 of 13 congressional seats through gerrymandering. Their domination of congressional delegates believes that North Carolina's recent history as a battleground state. It has a Democratic government and attorney general who declined to defend the maps. A three-judge panel last week invalidated the maps drawn by the Republican-controlled legislature in 2016, called improper partisan gerrymandering. The panel ordered the lawmakers to redraw the boundaries that would have been by the 29th of January. The case, the Supreme Court has never thrown out a state electoral district map because of partisan gerrymandering. It has two cases on the docket. The court has already heard a case from Wisconsin and accepted one from Maryland. In the Wisconsin case, the justice said a new district map did not have to be drawn until the case was decided. In Maryland, challenged the loss in the lower court and have appealed, so the single district boundary dispute has remained in place. North Carolina leaders say their state should receive the same consideration, in other words, same consideration of gerrymandering. Lawmakers talk about state sovereignty, but the brief for the organization Common Cause says that their true motivation is as plain as day. The Republican contingents of legislation wants to enjoy the fruits of their grossly unconstitutional action for yet another election cycle, and the case is called Ruccio versus a Common Cause. The League of Women Voters, another group that challenged the plan, noted that the Republicans' drawing of the map started as one of their goals to retain a political advantage. The group said in the brief that the oral arguments in the Wisconsin case, Justice Kennedy asked the lawyer for Wisconsin whether it would be legal for those who drew the map to have an overriding concern, increasing one party's influence. Justice Kennedy's hypothetical is this case, the brief said. That's the common cause brief. On to let me just stop real quickly here. The Sacramento Bee, this is something Sandra Fluke sent by on the 17th of January. Make America Kind Again. This is from the Women's March there in California. 62% of the people voted for Hillary Monster Clinton. And they even cited August, American Psychological Association found significantly more Democrats, 73%, were feeling stressed out about the future of the nation than Republicans, 56%, or independents, 59%. That's still a high percentage. I call it Democrats despair Trump trauma. As 2018 dawns, Democrats recognize their resistance can only be sustained through stepped-up self-care and laser-like political action. And this is what happened in Sacramento, California. If I would bring this up here. Self-care, each single individual I talked to identified a behavior they wanted to modify. More sleep, fewer glasses of wine, regular exercise, meditation. Hadn't heard this one before. You can't run a marathon for 4 years. Oh, Sandra Fluke. Oh, good. She's cited in this. Others plan to limit screen time, particularly on cable news. You can't run a marathon for 4 years. Sandra Fluke, the Los Angeles-based social justice attorney. Think of this as a relay race. You have to pass the baton and take turns and take a rest. She's right about that. I've tried helping people take the long view, said a Berkeley-based therapist, David Shaddock. Even at the worst of times, people are painting, writing poetry, a sign of human spirit that can't be crushed. We advise this. We've been in this game over 40 years, same thing. If you're feeling bad, Sigmund offered, do something that makes you feel better. Well, I agree there. I have to tell H about this. H had a comedy series on her show about comedy. Something we don't do much around here. Anyway, the untapped opportunity for common ground. This approach found 87% of Americans agree on at least one of the things: the desire for people to take a deep breath and then calm down. There's no doubt about that. You can't get too much about that. Scenes from Sacramento's Women's March in a partnership of the Women's March in Washington, one of hundreds of sister marches across the country. So we once again gear up for that, and we'll see where we go, Women's March. Anyway, now let me go on to Dr. Sabato here, Open Season in the House. This is by Kyle Klondike. He's after Republicans' retirements give Democrats some clear topics, but the path to the House majority is more about beating incumbents. Not very easy to do there. So far, there are 46 House seats where an incumbent won't be running for re-election in November. That is already above the post-war average. The current list of retirees, 31 Republicans, 15 Democrats. The 46 crystal ball rates 18 as competitive. In order to win the House, the Democrats would have to net a half dozen more seats out of the total number of open seats. Now, these are some of the ratings here. This is out of Arizona. McSally, she's running for the Senate, an open seat there. It used to be a toss-up. Now it leans Democrat. Christine Batos out of Illinois, 17. Safe Democrat there. Sherry Batos, excuse me. An open seat, DeSantis, that is Florida, 6. Likely Republicans there. There used to be safe Republicans. New Jersey is an open seat there. from a toss-up to lean Democrat. Labino. Anyway, Nevada 3, that's another open seat there. Rosen from a toss-up to safe Democrat in Nevada. In Washington State, this is C.W. Rogers from safe Republican to likely Republican. I remember that seat out in Washington State. She has had that seat for some while. 2/3 of the open seats, of 31 and 46, are held by Republicans. A lopsided number of open seats in a one party. A direction can sometimes be a sign of trouble. It stands to reason that, well, that depends. Still, there are structural factors in. One would probably expect Republicans to have more open seats in 18, regardless of the political environment, because the party won 47 more than the Democrats last year. So there are more Republicans who opt not to run another term than Democrats. Well, none of that happens there. Passing of the baton, as Senator Fluke said. 8 of the 21 standing committee chairs are retiring. That's quite a few, but there's 21 of them. And 5 of them are going to lose their chairmanships next year because of term limits. Some have to leave because of other things going on there. Other considerations, retiring members on both sides are actually, some of them are seeking other offices now. That always happens. That's the case of 8 of the 15 departing Democrats, including Maryland's John Delaney, who is running for president, and 12 of the 31 exiting Republicans. So these are some of the open seats here are likelihood to flip. Florida 27, this is Ross Latham there. It's a Republican seat, leans a Democrat, could flip. Darrell Isis, he could also flip. That's California 49. McSally, we talked about that, another likely flip there. That's Arizona 2. Jersey 2, leans a Democrat there. A toss-up in California 39, that's Ed Rossi. Another toss-up in Minnesota, Waltz. He's running for governor out there. Wisconsin 8, that's David Ratchid. A toss-up there, he's a Republican. Michigan's 11th, that is Dave Trott. It's a toss-up. In New Hampshire, the 9th, it's a Democrat there, Carol Porter, is a toss-up there. And let's see, Jackie Rosenwiller, that was New Hampshire 1, leans Democrat there. Lynn Jenkins, Kansas 2, leans a Republican. Charles Dent, that is a Republican, and it still leans Republican. Pennsylvania 15, Nevada 4, leans Democrat there. Ruben, not sure how to pronounce his last name. Human. Anyway, Lamar Smith, that's Texas 21, likely Republican. They've been around a long time. Florida 6, Ron DeSantis, likely Republican there. New Mexico 2, likely Republican there, Steve Pierce. And Evan Jenkins, that's West Virginia 3, likely Republican there. And in Arizona 9th, Kristen Samuma. Anyway, some of what's going on there. And look at some of the margins here. We Rolf Lapham, Clinton won Rolf Lapham's District 58, 2.5 to 39. He's further defeated. 50% the monster got in Darrell Issett's district, much closer in McSally's, 49.6 to 44.7 for oh boy, they have DJ Trump. And Ed Royce, that's an interesting situation. The monster pulled that one out 51.5 to 52.9. That's in California. Now the reverse is true for this toss-up in Minnesota. In that district, this is Waltz, 38.4% for the Hillary Clinton and 53.3% for DJ Trump. Some of these I won't get into. This one in Kansas. Trump got 55.8%. This is Lynn Jenkins. And Hillary Clinton 37.4%. Be interesting there to see where that is going. Lamar Smith's district, that's in Texas, 52.5, with a 10 point to 42 there in Texas. And yeah, this Evans Jenkins district in West Virginia, Trump won it by 72.5%. Clinton only got 23.3%. Far right-wing district. But in Arizona, the Arizona 9th, she got 54.7% and 38.4%. So it looks a little better. We want to go to Martha McSally because she's running for the Senate. A very competitive race there for her at Senate race. We've already went over many of these different ones here now. Open seats that were rated safe for incumbents. That was in 2016. We won't go over those, but if we look at some of these, well, Marsha Blackburn, for instance, Trump carried at 50. Where's Marsha Blackburn? Lost her. Oh, here we go. 67.5 for Trump. So that's safe Republicans. Some of these you can look at, very quickly, and some of these states where it was very, very high run up for DJ Trump. This is Bob Galletti. Trump got, this is in Virginia, 59.7%. She got 37.9%. There are very few of those districts out there. Petito, O'Rourke, excuse me, that's in Texas. That district, Clinton got 67.9%. Little different there. And let's see, another note indicating he will not run for another term. James Bernstein as a retiring member because he's not indicated not run for another term. If he is confirmed, it will not hold a special election for the seat. Seems likely to be, that's next November. All right, well, I'm not sure about that. The conclusion is, last summer we looked at the presidential, non-presidential parties in open seats. And let me get the last paragraph. This has been very, very long. The Democrats, let's say Democrats do meet our standard and net a half dozen seats or so out of the open seats. That means the Democrats need to defeat 15 or 20 Republican incumbents to win the House. That's quite a few. Very, very difficult to do. So there's some seats that they don't list here. One of the things they missed here, Sherry Butos, that's Illinois 17, a benefit in retirement of sorts earlier this week of her top likely opponent, a developer named Keene, who dropped out of the race. Out of the picture, moves to a safe Democrat there. A lot of Republicans in some of these districts are just not running for re-election. Let's go to ESPN while we still have voice to go there. The upcoming All-Star game to the captains, Mr. LeBron James and Mr. Stephen Curry. Not unusual there. Let me get the NBA scores from last night. The 76ers were in Boston. The 76ers 89-80. The Magic were in Cleveland. The Cavaliers 104-103. The T-Wolves were in Houston. The Rockets 116-98. The Pacers were out in Portland. Trailblazers 100-86. In college, men's college basketball, 3 there. Number 2, Virginia, was at Georgia Tech. Virginia 64-48. St. Mary's was at Gonzaga. Gonzaga is 13. Out in Spokane, Washington, 74-71 was the score there. St. Mary's over number 13 Gonzaga. And finally, number 23 Michigan and Nebraska. Nebraska 72-52. That's men's college basketball. On to the NHL, the Capitals and Devils. Devils 4-3 over the Capitals in the final overtime. The Bruins and Islanders. Bruins 5-2 over the Islanders of New York. The Maple Leafs and the Flyers. Flyers are 3-2. The Stars and Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets final overtime there. Blue Jackets are 2-1. Columbus Blue Jackets. The Sabres in Rangers. Rangers 4-3. That was the final. The Blues and Senators. Blues 4-1 in that contest of St. Louis. The Ottawa Senators. The Golden Knights and Lightning. Golden Knights are 4-1. The Golden Knights of Las Vegas and the Lightning from Tampa Bay. Never thought we'd see whatever hockey there. The Coyotes and Predators. Predators 3-2. Predators from Nashville. The Coyotes are from Arizona. Interesting getting an ice rink out there. The Sharks and Avalanche. Avalanche 5-3. And the Penguins and Kings. Penguins were the Kings here, 3-1 there. Now Pittsburgh and LA's Kings. Hard to get an ice rink going there also. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was, and we'll see what has happened in the House today. Will the government be open? Will the government be shut down? Will they go with a short-termer? That'll be about a 4-week short-termer on the debt ceiling. Or will there be a furlough? How will it be handled? It's tricky because you can close the government down, but there's a very, very tricky problem in bringing it back up again. Or another plan was floated around, not a month, but just a few days to do a fix. We don't see that happening, but nonetheless, we'll have it on the week that was. We'll have a numbers man. We'll be talking about the Beige Book. That's from the various Federal Reserve districts, how the economy is doing in those particular districts, and the machinations surrounding the New York Fed and the replacement there, what they plan to do in terms of diversity and various other things there, because you can be on the Fed and not necessarily be an economist. You can be a business person, etc. The Atlanta Fed has an African American there, the only one, and I believe the first one in the history of a Fed. Anyway, this will do it, and we have the Monday Morning Quarterback course coming up. And we do have an open source report, and we'll get to The chip problems. Evidently, Intel has problems now in some of their newer chips, not some of their older chips. It's still around. AMD has inherited some of the problem, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about security. We have a little segment from Mr. Cribbs on security. We appreciate having his report on our open source report. Good day, and have a good weekend.